Everyone always likes to talk about how broken new Pokemon are with their 100 plus power signature moves with 100% accuracy and abilities that give them insane boosts, which is absolutely a reasonable observation to make. However, there's actually a fair bit of that going on in early generations too. We just don't really view it in the same way since we're so used to it. A lot of mechanics that have been around for generations would probably be written off as low-effort broken theoremons if someone suggested them today, even though they are totally real and were released before the dawn of power creep was really a thing. So in this video, I want to take a look at the most broken Pokemon in mechanics that were introduced in early generations, which I am again defining as Gen 4 and before, and discussing how they still manage to be broken today. First, we have Shedinja's Wonder Guard. This ability, along with Shedinja, along with abilities as a whole, were introduced in Generation 3, and it still remains as the most broken ability ever made, and nothing else really even comes close. Wonder Guard makes the user immune to all non-super effective direct damage, so the only way to deal any damage to Shedinja is by super effective direct damage or indirect damage like status conditions or entry hazards. The catch is that Shedinja can only ever have 1 HP, not 1 base HP, 1 HP, since this is the only Pokemon stat in the entire game that doesn't use the traditional stat formula. Imagine telling someone that you made a Theoremon with 13 immunities and balanced it out by giving it an HP stat that doesn't use the traditional stat formula so that it's always 1. If Shedinja wasn't real, then this idea would absolutely be treated as a low-effort stink post. Shedinja hasn't been obtainable since Sword and Shield and BDSP, and for good reason. When they inevitably bring old Pokemon back in Pokemon Champions with access to new generational gimmicks, they're really going to have to do some rebalancing so that Shedinja doesn't break the game with Terra if they even bring this thing anywhere near a Terra format. People always talk about Terra Electric Shedinja with Air Balloon, but there's also Terra Flying Shedinja next to Mega Rayquaza that gives it no weaknesses, since Delta Stream turns off all flying weaknesses on the field, and there's probably even more ways to make Shedinja completely invincible with all the tools and gimmicks we now have access to. Next, we have Kyogre. A lot of early generation legendaries have been unable to stand the test of time because their stats, abilities, and move pools have just been outclassed. Mewtwo, Lugia, and the late Guardians have all had it pretty rough, just to name a few, but Kyogre is probably the best and most consistent legendary Pokemon ever due to the ridiculous tools that it was given access to in its debut generation of 3. One of the main parts of the story of Ruby and Sapphire is the extreme weather set by Groudon and Kyogre's ability Drizzle that sets rain upon entry always has and always will be a great ability, unlike Pressure, which a lot of other legendaries were cursed into getting. Kyogre is water type, meaning that it will get stab and a rain boost, unlike Groudon, which sets harsh sunlight but doesn't get stab on fire. Kyogre is a special attacker and has access to Water Spout, a 150 base power special water type move that hits both opponents in a double battle, unlike Groudon again since it gets Eruption but isn't a special attacker. While Kyogre did receive some buffs in Gen 6 with Origin Pulse in its primal form, it has always had access to Thunder and Ice Beam, coverage moves that help complement its Water Stab very well. Kyogre even received a nerf, although it was probably more because of Politoed than it was Kyogre, which was when weather setting abilities were made so that the weather they set only lasts 5 turns instead of the whole battle. Next, we have Smeargle's signature move, Sketch. Smeargle was introduced in Generation 2, and it is a very unique Pokemon in that it can only learn one move through level up, Sketch. It learns no TMs, no tutor moves, and no egg moves. However, Sketch is able to permanently copy any move in the game, which means that Smeargle can actually learn about 900 moves. Like Shedinja, imagine telling someone that your Theoremon idea is that the Pokemon just learns every move in the game, and your way of balancing it out is by giving it terrible stats. I never played any Gen 2 games, and never ran into any Smeargle in later Gen games that had it until the post-game, So I'm really curious as to how Game Freak expected this Pokemon to function in a playthrough. If this was a Theorymon, I think a very valid criticism is that it would be pretty much completely unusable in a playthrough, because how are you expected to spend all that time and effort sketching and relearning Sketch while just trying to defeat the next gym? Anyway, the potential to learn every move in the game, with some exceptions of course, will obviously never be matched, and if you want an ultra specific strategy to work, a lot of the time your only option is Smeargle. Since it can learn every move in the game, it's the only Pokemon with access to Fake Out, Follow Me, and Spore, which is generally its go-to moveset in VGC, with Decorate, Wide Guard, Spiky Shield, or whatever fourth move you feel your team needs to go along with the go-to 3. Next, we have the ability Huge Power. Along with Wonder Guard, this ability was introduced in Generation 3, and it remains as a top 5 ability in the game. Huge Power's effect is quite simple, which is that it doubles the user's effective attack stat. This obviously goes for Pure Power as well, and in Gen 3, only 2 evolutionary lines got access to these abilities, Medicham and Azumarill. Azumarill was Mono Water, which was a special type, and the only physical moves it learned through Level Up were Rollout and Double Edge. Medicham is Fighting Psychic, with Fighting being physical, but it only got High Jump Kick and Reversal by Level Up in Gen 3. So, with their attack stats being low, and them being able to learn very few physical attacking moves by Level Up, they obviously weren't a problem from a balance perspective. Where it started to become more powerful was when the physical special split was made to give these Pokemon better physical attacking options, when Azumarill got Aqua Jet and the new Fairy type, when it was given to Mega Mawile, and when it will very likely be given to Mega Starmie as well. Who would have thought that the best way to make a new Mega Evolution broken is by giving it a Generation 3 ability? With a 100 base attack stat, doubling that results in an effective attack stat that is equivalent to a base attack stat of approximately 250, with 105 being equivalent to approximately 260. Next, we have a very similar entry, which is Marowak's signature item, the Thick Club. Cubone and Marowak are both Gen 1 Pokemon, but held items weren't introduced until Gen 2, and this line was given a signature item that just doubles its attack stat. That's right, it's Huge Power before Huge Power was a thing. Unlike Azumarill, Marowak is Pure Ground, which was one of the physical types before the split, and it got 3 signature Bone moves by Level Up, Bone Club, Bone Meringue, and Bone Rush, with some good physical TMs and egg moves like Earthquake and Rock Slide. Marowak also has higher attack than Azumarill and Medicham, making it hit very hard after the Thick Club boost, just lacking the priority and setup that Azumarill ended up being given. Along with Marowak, we also have Pikachu's Light Ball introduced in Gen 2, and Clampearl's Deep Sea Tooth introduced in Gen 3. Clampearl's Deep Sea Tooth doubles its special attack, while Pikachu's Light Ball doubles its physical and special attack, making it the Thick Club and Deep Sea Tooth combined. I think the fact that these two only work on not fully evolved Pokemon, one of them being the face of the franchise, makes them a lot more balanced compared to Marowak, which is fully evolved, even if Marowak still isn't that great. The Soul Dew also deserves a mention, the signature item of Latios and Latios, but that item was nerfed significantly, unlike these other signature items that still have their original effect today. Next, we have the ability Shadow Tag. This was originally the ability of Wobbuffet and Wynaut in Gen 3, and like Wonder Guard and Huge Power, it remains as one of the most broken abilities ever made. Shadow Tag prevents the opposing side from switching, and at the time, it basically had no counterplay, which is what made it even more broken. There was no way to be immune to Shadow Tag's trapping effect, and the only pivoting move that existed was Baton Pass, a move that about 20 evolutionary lines learned. Starting in Gen 4, opposing Shadow Tag Pokemon were made immune to Shadow Tag, which I assume was made entirely to prevent infinite Wobbuffet mirrors, which was an issue in Gen 3. U-Turn was introduced in Gen 4 as a consistent and reliable pivoting move, and there was also the Shed Shell held item, which allows a trapped Pokemon to switch out. In Gen 5, Volt Switch was introduced, another consistent pivoting move, and in Gen 6, Ghost-type Pokemon were made immune to all forms of trapping. Even with all of these nerfs, Shadow Tag is still banned in pretty much all singles formats due to it completely eliminating the ability to do one of the main components of repositioning, and while it's not amazing in doubles, since Gothitao has been the only user of it for a while, it definitely will be once we get Mega Gengar back. Next, we have Shuckle. Shuckle is definitely the worst Pokemon on this list, but its design is just so extreme that it would sound unbelievably fake if someone suggested it as a Theorymon, so I think it still deserves a mention. Shuckle has base 230 defense and special defense, which is the highest of any base form Pokemon in the game by a large margin. However, it's balanced out by having 20 HP, 10 attack and special attack, and 5 speed. To this day, Shuckle still has the third largest difference between its highest stat and lowest stat, with both of its defenses being 225 points greater than its speed stat, only behind Chansey and Blissey, also early gen Pokemon. However, with such low HP, the 230 defenses are basically meaningless, and in terms of the average percent damage taken, Shuckle's defensive stats are approximately equivalent to a 110, 110, 110 spread, which uses 150 less stat points total, just showing how inefficient a 20, 230, 230 defensive stat spread is. I think what really makes Shuckle feel like a stink post is the fact that it gets Power Trick, a status move that switches the user's attack and defense stat, giving Shuckle 230 attack and 10 defense. This is probably the most gimmicky part of its whole design, and while I could maybe see this being used on a Trick Room team since Shuckle gets Stab, Spread, Rock Slide, and is tied for having the lowest speed in the game, the only time I've ever seen Power Trick come up is in those most damage possible videos. Lastly, we have Arceus. Mythical Pokemon typically have a 600 base stat total, and the only ones that are higher than that are Hoopa Unbound, Mega Diancie, and Arceus. Hoopa Unbound is an alternate form of Hoopa with a 680 base stat total, the same as most restricted legendaries, and Mega Diancie is obviously a Mega Evolution, which has 100 more stats than regular Diancie. However, both of these are still less than Arceus in its regular form, which has a base stat total of 720, 120 in all 6 stats. Arceus is not min-maxed, it's max-maxed. Not only that, it can also be any type in the game thanks to its ability, it can have a move of any type in the game with 100 power and 100% accuracy, it learns a move of pretty much every type in the game anyway if it doesn't want to use its ability to change its type and the type of judgment, it gets Dragon Dance, Swords Dance, Bulk Up, and Calm Mind for setting up, Cosmic Power and Recover to stall, and Extreme Speed for priority. You name it, Arceus probably has it. Like Kyogre, Arceus has been one of the most consistent Pokemon in the Uber tier, and when it was made legal in VGC for the first time in Reg J, it was able to keep up with the top threats of Calyrex Shadow and Miraidon, and I'd probably say it's an A tier restricted Pokemon in Gen 9 along with Kyogre. And those are some of the most broken early generation Pokemon in mechanics and how they still manage to be broken today. Let me know if you disagree with any of my reasonings or feel that I missed any. Anyway, if you want to support me and my channel, just leave a nice comment since I do read all comments. You can also become a member for 99 US cents a month to get a badge next to your name and early video access like all of these lovely people. If you want bonus content, check out my second channel, Extra Bell, where I post videos I've scrapped for the main channel as well as more casual unscripted videos. Likes are also one of the ways that YouTube determines if a video should be passed around to more people, so if you feel that this video deserves to be, I would appreciate it. Thanks for watching.